There is a particular kind of phone call that changes the temperature of your life before a single useful word has been said. My accountant called me on a Thursday afternoon. She had handled my books for 24 years. She saw me through my wife's illness, through the recession of 2008, through the lean years before municipal contracts got steady, through the decade when Wade Utility Solutions went from 2 trucks and a rented trailer to 43 employees and work spread across 5 counties. Elaine Porter did not ask me to come by her office and not tell my son unless something was wrong enough to deserve secrecy. "Russell," she said, "I need you here tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, alone." I was standing in my garage in Roswell, Georgia, sorting old tool chests I'd promised myself I would organize sometime around Easter and had somehow dragged all the way into October. Retirement had given me the one thing I'd never known how to use properly: unstructured time. I was still learning what to do with hours that didn't already belong to payroll, weather, permits, or somebody else's crisis. "What's this about?" I asked. Her voice stayed flat. "I'll explain when you get here. Please don't mention it to Gavin. I'm sorry to be cryptic, but I need you to trust me." She had earned that trust 20 times over, so I told her I'd be there. Then I stood in the garage with the phone still in my hand and listened to the television inside the house, loud enough to rattle the den windows because my younger son, Tyler, had once again left a sports channel screaming at an empty room while he and his girlfriend occupied my guest suite like it was a constitutional right. I remember thinking, not quite fear, not quite anger, something more precise than both: recognition. Like some piece of me had already arrived at the truth before the rest of me had caught up. My older son, Gavin, had been with the company 8 years, operations manager, good with clients, quick with numbers, easy smile, always knew when to clap a man on the shoulder, when to laugh, when to keep his voice warm and low enough to sound trustworthy. People like Gavin move through a room like they belong in it, and for a long time, I thought that was leadership. It turns out it can also be camouflage. That evening he called. He called most evenings, which used to feel attentive, and lately had begun to feel like a man checking whether his weather report still held. "Hey, Dad," he said. "How's the equipment inventory going?" "Slow," I said. "Same as everything at my age." He laughed. Easy, natural. That was his gift. Gavin was never pushy enough to trigger resistance. He just applied steady pressure until other people moved themselves and thought it had been their idea. "You ought to let me handle that stuff," he said. "You're supposed to be winding down." "We'll see." "Celeste and I were thinking about coming by Sunday," he said. "She wants to bring that baked ziti you like." His wife, Celeste, was much like him. Gracious, attentive, polished in a way that made people feel included while withholding the actual warmth that would make it real. She asked after my blood pressure every family dinner with the concern of a woman trying on compassion like it was the right necklace for the evening. "That's fine," I said. We talked for another few minutes about nothing. Then I hung up and sat alone at my kitchen table with reheated soup, while Tyler and Bree laughed upstairs in the room they had been occupying for 2 years and 9 months under the banner of temporary. Temporary, in my experience, is one of the most abused words in the English language. Tyler was 33. Bree was 31. Between them, they had 3 part-time jobs, 1 failed online candle business, and a remarkable ability to convert every available flat surface in my house into storage for plans they never completed. I went to bed that night and did not sleep much. Elaine's office was in Alpharetta, in a brick building with a chiropractor downstairs and a dentist on the other side. She had left a larger firm years ago because she got tired of being asked to make small fraud look elegant. I followed her out because I trusted her, and because trust is worth paying for when you find it. Her assistant let me in without small talk. Elaine was standing by the window holding a folder in both hands. That was my first real warning. Elaine never stood when she could sit and get straight to the point. Standing meant she was carrying something she didn't want to set down. Sit, she said. Do you want coffee? No. She sat across from me and opened the folder. 3 weeks ago, Gavin asked me to assemble the company documents for the valuation package you'd mentioned wanting once you chose a retirement date. I nodded. I found discrepancies in the operating account going back about 16 months. What kind of discrepancies? She slid the first page across the desk. Transfers. Regular. Structured. Small enough individually not to trigger immediate scrutiny. Large enough in total to matter very much. When I traced them, she said carefully, the destination account belonged to Gavin and Celeste jointly. I looked down at columns of dates, amounts, memo codes, routine-looking language, equipment procurement, temporary vendor reconciliation, intercompany adjustment, all the ordinary labels dishonest people use when they understand exactly how honest paperwork usually looks. How much? $136,400. I leaned back. He's a signatory, I said. He has operating authority. He has authority to move money for business expenses, Elaine said. He does not have authority to transfer operating funds into a personal account using forged approvals. That word moved through me slowly. She slid another page over. 3 of the transfers have your signature attached to the authorization trail. I looked. Then she put 3 actual signatures of mine beside them from documents I had signed in her office. They were not close. Not if you had ever seen my name written more than twice. Russell, she said quietly, I've watched you sign documents for 24 years. That isn't your hand. I stared at it. He forged me. Yes. There are sentences you hear once, and then spend the next year finding them in your bones at odd hours. That was one of them. She kept going because good accountants, like good surgeons, do not stop halfway through once a body is open. There's more. Of course there was. 6 months ago, Gavin and Celeste registered a new business entity. She handed me the printout from the Secretary of State, Wade Project Solutions, LLC. I remember looking at that name and almost admiring the nerve, close enough to mine to borrow reputation. Different enough to survive a lawsuit if presented by someone with a good suit and no shame. Ownership, Elaine said, tapping the page, is 50-50. Gavin and Celeste. My mouth had gone dry. What's it for? I cross-checked his outgoing business mail with the general inbox archives, she said. He forgot on several occasions that your system backs up the CC field centrally. I found correspondence with 4 of your 5 largest contractors. I looked up. He's been courting my clients. Yes. He's building a competing company. With your client relationships, she said, and your money. That sentence settled in the room. I said nothing for a moment because there are only so many ways a man can tell himself he did not just hear what he heard. Then I asked the practical question because practicality is the last thing pride lets go of. What do you think the plan was? Elaine folded her hands. I think when you publicly commit to a retirement sale, he positions Wade Project Solutions as the natural next home for clients who already know him. He doesn't need to buy your company. He just needs you to step away while he's already laid track underneath it. I drove home in complete silence. I do not remember most of the route. I remember sitting in my truck in the driveway for 10 full minutes before I went inside. Tyler's car was there. 11:40 on a Friday morning, and Tyler's car was there because Tyler had not held a full-time job in over a year and now treated noon as an ambitious start. He looked up from the couch when I came in. Back early. Short meeting. I went straight to my office, shut the door, and called a lawyer. Robert Keene. Estate planning, business protection, family law. Office in Buckhead. His name came from a contractor I'd known 20 years who told me, Keene doesn't make people feel good, but he makes them safe. At that moment, safe sounded better than good. His assistant gave me a slot the next afternoon. That evening, Gavin called again. I let it go to voicemail. He left one of those warm, concern-shaped messages people leave when they want to seem present without risking any actual information. I deleted it. Then I spent 3 hours at my desk pulling records, comparing dates, checking emails, finding the little places where trust had made me lazy. It is a humiliating thing, discovering how much of betrayal is just your own optimism weaponized against you. I heard Tyler and Bree in the upstairs hall laughing. Bree knocked on my office door around 8:15. "Walter," she still called me Walter sometimes before correcting to Russell, as if I were an uncle she'd had in another life. "We're ordering sushi. Want anything?" "No." "Okay. You seem tired." I almost laughed at that. "I am." She gave me a little sympathetic nod and drifted off, probably to tell Tyler I was overworking again. I heard them later through the ceiling. People who live in another man's house too long eventually stop treating walls as moral barriers. I opened my office door and stood at the foot of the staircase where sound carried just enough. Tyler said, "Gavin thinks the sale goes through by March if Dad finally picks a date." Bree asked, "So what's our move?" Tyler laughed. "We stay put. Gavin says once the money lands, Dad'll probably toss us something to get us out without drama. He hates conflict." "Do you think he'll actually do it?" "Of course. He's a soft touch about family stuff. We just need to still be here when it happens." That was the moment whatever remained soft in me around that arrangement finally calcified. I went back into my office, sat down, and for a long time did not move. Robert Keene's office had the particular silence expensive lawyers cultivate: soft carpet, real wood, coffee that tasted like someone had paid attention to it. I laid everything out: transfer records, signature comparisons, business registration, email chains, notes, dates, my best reconstruction of the architecture of the theft. He read without interruption, asked 5 direct questions. Then he said, "The forged authorizations alone are criminal exposure, but I don't think that's your immediate priority." It isn't. What is? I want to protect what I built. I want the sale proceeds to go where I decide. I want my house protected. I want my younger son out of it. And I want my older son's little off-brand copycat company to benefit from my retirement approximately as much as he deserves. Robert nodded once. "Then we do 3 things. Quickly." He laid them out the way engineers appreciate things being laid out, sequentially, without decoration. First, an irrevocable trust: house, investments, retirement accounts, future sale proceeds. Structured while I was plainly competent and documented. Minimal required distributions to my sons. The remainder directed where I chose. Second, formal documentation of the forgeries through a forensic accountant while Gavin remained unaware. The moment he knew, assets and data might move. Third, immediate written notice for Tyler and Bree to vacate. In Georgia, without a written lease, they were guests. Guests who had long outlived the hospitality that sheltered them. "How fast?" "The trust can be drafted this week," he said. "The notice by Friday. The forensic review within 72 hours if Elaine cooperates." "She will." He nodded. "Then we move before anyone smells smoke." I signed the engagement agreement right there. On the way home, I stopped at my bank, a different branch from the one Gavin used for business deposits, and requested certified historical prints for the operating account. A manager named Elise did not ask why. I appreciated her professionalism so much I almost wanted to leave a tip. I sat in the truck afterward and reviewed 18 months of bank history line by line. The pattern was cleaner than I expected. Transfers on the 12th or 15th of every month. Amounts between $5,800 and $11,600, always in language just plausible enough to slip by if your trust was doing the review instead of your suspicion. My phone buzzed. Tyler. I let it ring. When I got home, Bree had turned my dining table into what she called her workspace, which in practical terms meant my wife's old oak table was covered in color-coded folders related to a nursing program she had been looking into for 14 months without once actually enrolling in anything. She smiled up at me. "Am I in your way?" No movement accompanied the question. "It's fine," I said. That night I heard enough from upstairs to understand the shape of it all. Tyler and Bree were not waiting to recover. They were waiting to extract. Sunday, Gavin and Celeste came for dinner. Baked rigatoni, good bottle of wine, easy smiles, the whole long choreography of a family pretending not to smell gas. Tyler and Bree came down too. We all sat at the same table where my wife and I had once helped with science projects, signed report cards, talked about prom dates and braces and college. Gavin waited until dessert. "Dad," he said, "Celeste and I have been thinking about the transition timing. We've talked informally with a few contractors just to make sure there's a smooth handoff whenever you decide." "Which contractors?" He named 2 of the 4. He did not blink. "We didn't want to get ahead of you." Celeste touched my wrist lightly. "We just want things to land well for everyone, Russell." Everyone. That word did a lot of work in my house. I looked at both my sons, at Tyler, who had been discussing how to stay under my roof until a windfall softened me, at Gavin, who had been transferring my money into his own account while building a competing company with my surname hanging off the front like stolen brass. And I thought, with a calm that almost impressed me, "No, you do not." "We'll talk more about it soon," I said. They left that night thinking, I am certain, that they were still working within the radius of my trust. Robert texted me the next morning. "Trust documents ready, notices drafted." I replied, "Proceed." The trust package arrived by courier Thursday morning. 34 pages. House, accounts, investment distributions, sale proceeds. Minimum statutory obligations to my sons, then the rest directed precisely where I wanted it. 2 regional trade scholarships in my wife's name. A contribution to the Cancer Research Foundation that had cared for her in the final year. A vocational grant fund for students going into civil engineering and heavy equipment technology. No wasted sentiment, just corrected direction. I signed every page at the kitchen table while Tyler and Bree slept upstairs under the roof they had mistaken for permanent. Friday morning, Robert's 2 envelopes arrived. I set them on my desk and drank my coffee first because some things deserve caffeine. At 10 o'clock, I walked into the den. Tyler was on the couch, half inside a sports channel and half inside his phone. I put the envelope on the coffee table. "What's this?" 30-day notice to vacate. You and Bree need to make other arrangements. It's legal. Effective today." He stared at the heading, then at me, then back at the paper. "Are you serious?" "Yes." "Dad, come on." "I'm not interested in come on. We live here. You've been guests in my house for 2 years and 9 months. We're family." I nodded. "That is what you told Bree last Saturday when you said I was a soft touch who'd probably pay you to leave once the business sold." All the color left his face at once. He stood. "You were listening?" "Yes." He tried hurt first, then outrage, then disbelief. He went through all of it fast, like a man trying jackets in bad weather. "This is because of Gavin, isn't it?" "This is because of both of you." He said something about fairness. I looked at him for a long moment and said the truest thing I had said all week. I was fair, for years. What I am now is finished. Then I went back to my office. The argument upstairs began within 20 minutes. Bree crying, Tyler angry, calls made, whispers when I passed by, as though privacy had suddenly become a principle they respected. By lunchtime, they were sitting at my kitchen table when I came out. Tyler said, "Can we at least talk about this?" We just did. "No," he said. "Actually talk." I made a sandwich first because I did not wish to negotiate hungry. Then I stood at the counter and said, "You built your plan around the assumption that I wouldn't act because you were family. That assumption has expired. Bree had tears in her eyes. Tyler looked at me like I had violated some unwritten contract. Maybe I had, but only the one they had drafted without my consent. 3 days later, Gavin called. Different voice this time. The warmth had thinned. Whatever friendliness remained was mostly habit dressed as strategy. "Dad, we need to talk." "Thursday," I said. "Dinner. You and Celeste." He agreed because men like Gavin always think the meeting is still salvageable right until the room proves otherwise. I cooked properly. Roast chicken, potatoes, green beans, bread from the bakery my wife liked, candles, plates out, no chaos, no raised voice waiting in the walls. I wanted everything around the conversation to be clean. Gavin and Celeste arrived at 6 on the nose. She brought flowers. He complimented the house. We ate salad, main course, half of dessert. Then I reached for the folder at my elbow. "Before we discuss why you asked for tonight," I said, "there are a few things you need to see." I slid the transfer history to Gavin first. He read the first page. His face did not change much. That is how you know a practiced liar. The first offense is the face. 16 months, I said. $136,400. Company funds into your joint account. Elaine found it. A forensic examiner authenticated the signature discrepancies yesterday. Celeste put down her fork. I slid the business registration across to her. Wade Project Solutions. 6 months ago. 4 contractor meetings. Email chains included. Gavin exhaled once through his nose. "Dad, let me explain the context." I'm sure the context is fascinating. Then I handed him the final page. "The trust is complete. My house, my accounts, the company sale proceeds. Protected, filed. You'll receive what Georgia law requires and not a dollar more. Whether I pursue a criminal complaint over the forgeries depends in part on what you say next." At that, the warmth evaporated entirely. What sat across from me then was not my son performing kindness. It was a man doing arithmetic under stress. "You'd have your own son charged." "I would have any man charged who stole from my company, forged my name, and used my money to build a competing business." Celeste said very softly, "Russell." I turned to her. "You co-own the LLC. You attended the client meetings. Don't ask me for the version of this where you were just standing nearby." The room went quiet. Gavin looked at the folder, then at me. Then finally, with no performance left, he said the one honest thing he had probably said in months. "I didn't think you'd ever actually look." I nodded once. "That," I said, "was your mistake." I told them to leave. Not dramatically. Just clearly. At the door, Gavin turned once as though there might still be some last appeal available through blood. There wasn't. After they left, I cleaned the plates, ran the dishwasher, and sat at the kitchen table with a mug of decaf and the strange calm that sometimes follows the exact right use of a blade. Robert texted later. "How did dinner go?" I wrote back, "Everything disclosed." Waiting 60 days before deciding on complaint. He has begun repayment. Because yes, Gavin had called 2 days later and left a voicemail unlike any I had ever heard from him. No charm, no warmth, no spin, just fatigue. He said he had moved $46,000 back into the operating account. Said Wade Project Solutions was being dissolved. Said the rest of the money was tied up and he would continue repaying it monthly. He said he did not expect forgiveness. That mattered more than if he had asked for it. I saved the voicemail. I did not respond emotionally. I responded legally. Robert drafted a repayment agreement. Clear terms. No sentiment. No promise of mercy beyond what structure requires. Tyler's deadline arrived on a Tuesday. Robert came with me. So did a Cobb County deputy named Lawson, who had the calm voice of a man who had watched family denial collide with paperwork more times than he could count. Tyler opened the door. Bree was crying already. Good. I prefer a person arrive emotionally accurate. Deputy Lawson explained the order. 2 hours for final removal of personal belongings. Nothing belonging to the house. Tyler looked at me like I was doing something outrageous. I looked back at him like a homeowner. They packed in garbage bags because they had spent 30 days hoping law would become optional out of embarrassment. It did not. At the curb, Bree turned and said, "I hope you're happy." I said nothing, because the truthful answer would have required more cruelty than I felt necessary. Tyler got into the car without looking back. Deputy Lawson handed me the final paperwork and said, "If they return without permission, call us." Then he left. Robert stood beside me in the driveway, hands in his coat pockets, and asked, "How do you feel?" I looked at my own front door. "At home," I said. 2 weeks later, the company sale closed. A regional site work firm out of Marietta had been trying to buy Wade Utility Solutions for 3 years. I had always said no because I assumed Gavin would want it honestly. Turns out he wanted the result, not the responsibility. I signed the sale papers in a conference room with men who understood what 3 decades of work looks like because they had spent their own lives building versions of it. When the proceeds hit the trust, I sat in my truck outside the closing office for a while before I turned the key. I had built something real, protected it, directed it, finished it. No one was going to turn my life's work into a family allowance. A week after that, I was sitting on my back porch with coffee when my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. It was Elaine. Her office line was down, she said. Some wiring issue. "I've been thinking about how everything turned out," she said. "I wasn't sure whether calling would feel inappropriate. You earned the right." She was quiet for a second. "Are you all right?" I looked out at the dogwood in the yard. My wife planted it 17 years ago because she said every yard needed one thing that bloomed on its own clock and answered to no one. "Better than I have been in a long time," I said. She laughed softly at that. "Good." I set down my mug. "Would you have lunch with me sometime? Not about business, just lunch." A short pause. "I'd like that," she said. We set Tuesday. Afterward, I stayed on the porch a while longer. The house behind me was quiet, not the lonely kind of quiet I used to fear when my wife first died. A cleaner kind, the kind that belongs to a life no longer under negotiation. The guitar on my kitchen counter still waited for me. I bought it the week after serving the eviction notices and had exactly 4 lessons under my belt. I was terrible. That was not the point. My instructor said the point at the beginning was only to keep showing up long enough for your hands to stop arguing with your intentions. I think that applies to most of life. That Sunday, Gavin left another voicemail. Short. He said, "I understand what I did. I don't expect you to fix it." I listened once, saved it, and went back to practicing chords badly in my kitchen while the late light came through the windows and landed on the table I had finally gotten back. My house, my time, my noise. I built a good life once. Now I was building a different one.